purpose of this meeting is to hear a report from staff regarding square footage for potential library sites in the village of Pinehurst. And in order to do that, I'm going to call on Jeff Sanborn, who may pass the baton quickly to Natalie. But Jeff, please go ahead.
Go ahead, Natalie.
That was quick, Jeff. Thanks.
In the name of efficiency.
In the name of efficiency. All right, I'm going to try to keep us on track today. So hopefully you guys are familiar with Stephen Covey, right? He wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I want to start off with one of his habits, which is begin with the end in mind, right? And so when we're through with today's work session, as I mentioned in the memo that I sent to you, the objective is for you, council, to have an understanding of the basis of the recommendation for the square footage that our community may need for library services. So there's no intent to talk about locations or anything like that, but really just try to make sure that we all understand where those numbers came from and why they are what they are. There may be differences of opinion as to whether or not we need that much or need more, or maybe we need less, but just to understand that starting point recommendation of the range of square footage. So in the agenda packet, I provided you with a memo, and I'm going to do my best to pull that up right now and share my screen so you can see that. And council may have questions as we go along. I'll try to answer those the best as I can. But what I really like to do is just take it piece by piece and piecemeal it, because I think we'll be more effective, in coming to an ultimate solution or conclusion if we understand the various components and pieces that kind of go into your decision-making process. So I'm going to share my screen and pull up this memo. Can everyone see that?
I never got this in my agenda packet, so I don't know if it, did everyone else?
It was online.
Yeah, it's on Novus.
It's on Novus.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I think it's pretty self-explanatory as you go through, Natalie, so
Good.
I think we'll all be on the
Right.
same page, so to speak,
Yeah.
but go right ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so beginning with the end in mind, I'm going to go to the very last page, right, to keep with my theme here. And this very last page of the memo is the complete summary of the square footage recommendation. And I want to tell you where this came from. When we got the original library needs assessment preliminary report from our consultants, I dug into it and did a lot of analysis and went back and said, okay, what is the most important things that we're hearing from our community that we need in a library, or that need to be expanded based on the ETC survey results? And I actually prepared this analysis that you see on your screen right here, okay? So our consultants did not prepare this, I did. And then I reviewed it with our consultants, specifically with Fred at Clearscapes, to make sure that the square footages that are in this analysis are reasonable based on his expertise and knowledge as an architect. So this is kind of a method that we had talked about before in terms of tier 1 and tier 2, and you may have some differences of opinions about what should be tier 1 or what should be tier 2 in any regard. And of course, all of that's going to work itself out over time. But at the end of the day, I've highlighted in yellow on this summary sheet right here the key library services or capabilities that residents expressed they think need to be expanded in that ETC survey. And you've already reviewed those survey results as well. The first one there being collection. And I think it's pretty commonly understood among the council, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that seemed to be the highest priority for our community. They want more books. And they want, an access to a larger collection. So the
I'd agree with
recommendation.
the latter, not necessarily the first statement. They
That
want
they want a
access
little-
to more books. I agree.
Access to more books, yeah.
Yeah, I
Digital
agree with
media
that.
too, of course, yes, yeah, digital media inclusive, as well, as you can see, I've got right here. So the recommendation is somewhere between 28 to 30,000 titles, okay? And so, to have 28 to 30,000 titles in a library in Pinehurst, Fred calculated that you would need this amount of linear feet of shelving for adults, children's, and teens. And their recommendation, based on the demographics of our community, is that 60% of the collection be allocated towards adult books, 35% of the collection be allocated to children's books, and only 5% of the collection be allocated to young adult or teen books.
And he considered digital? Because I don't think he did.
No, so the linear feet of space is just for hard books in the library.
So he didn't consider getting to that 30,000 using digital, right?
Digital would be unlimited. I mean, digital would be whatever's out
Right,
there.
so he assumed that we would need hard books,
30,000 hard
28 to
books.
30,000.
Correct.
That's an
28 to,
assumption that he made.
correct. 28 to 30,000 hard books in the library.
Which is not even 2 books per citizen.
But
Correct.
once again, hard books, he didn't include digital books at all.
Correct. So now I'm going to go back to, sorry for scrolling fast. So what I did try to do for you here, and this is how I organized the memo, and I hope that you found it helpful, is I tried to pull together the benchmark analysis that we did, which was fairly extensive, of other North Carolina libraries, along with the ETC survey results, because these are really the two things that are informing the recommendation. So when you look at a benchmark analysis, and all of that was included in the Library Services Needs Assessment Background Report, and so I pulled it in here for you as well. But right now, we have about 15,500 titles, books, hard books, Kevin, not digital, hard books in the library. And those books are around 1 book per person. Or it's actually 0.9 books per person in our community. In North Carolina, municipal libraries on average have 3 books per person. And if that were, if you were just to apply that parametric estimate to our population, that would say a collection of 51,000 books would be comparable with benchmark libraries, municipal libraries in North Carolina. And also here I've given you in comparison, Southern Pines that serves 14,000 residents has 65,785 hard books in its library, or 4 books per capita. So the recommendation of 30,000 titles is a resulting 1.8 books per capita. So it's still below benchmark, it's still below Southern Pines, but that is the ultimate recommendation for the number of hard books in the library, okay? And so you can see I gave you the segmented data for that, as well as adults, children's, and young adults. And I gave you the segmented data to point out that, as I did when I gave you these results initially, that this under 34 group has a greater need for obviously children's books, as well as young adult books. But you can see even older residents expressed, pretty much 50% of them said a greater collection is either extremely or very needed at the library, okay? So this is what everything is grounded on, is what our residents said in the ETC survey as what they felt or believed was either extremely or very needed, okay? Are there any questions about the collection size? Or where that recommendation came from of 30,000 books?
I don't have a question about your materials in the sense of, that's how you got there. But I do, Kevin's asking about digital books, ebooks. And then there's also the fact that the library has now joined the statewide books circulation program. So those are two ways to have more books available without more shelf space.
Right,
So
correct.
that's one thing that I think we need to think about. And the other thing is, in looking at some of the charts that are in this presentation, which breaks down by survey respondents within each age bracket, gave a certain response, and then a summary at the end. But if you go back to the ETC survey, those age brackets didn't all have the same number of respondents in them. More than 50%, 53% of the total number of respondents were 65 or older. And the other age brackets had, between 10 and 17% each. So has this been weighted to try and figure out, to get perhaps a clearer picture of what the population as a whole actually wants?
So as I mentioned when I presented the ETC survey, the demographics of the respondents are more highly weighted to the 65 plus. So the results you see here are raw results. Okay, so under 34, this could have been 40 people. Above 65, this could have been 250 people. I don't have that information on here, but it is in the survey, and I could provide that to you if that is of interest to you. But as I mentioned again, the results are more heavily weighted to an older demographic than what currently exists in our community, which is why when I presented the results, I strongly encouraged you to pay attention to what these younger demographics wanted, because they are underrepresented in the survey. Does that
Natalie,
help?
I recall that we've sort of touched on this discussion before.
We have.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, we
Because, okay. And also, as to what Jane and Kevin are both saying, you've done a great job of helping me understand right here, right now, what the community is saying and comparing it to the benchmarks. And I have some comments about going forward, but I think you've done a great job
Yeah.
of
Oh,
pulling
thank
it all together.
Thank you. I did try to pull it together. And Jane, to your point about access to the state library, all of these other libraries also have access to the state digital resources as well. So now, we're kind of like on level playing field, kind of, if you will.
Well, I think you gave great data as well, to have that as a goal.
Yeah.
But, and
Exactly.
I think that when you hard and fast things, it eliminates options, and I don't want to do that, but I think it's a worthy goal.
Yeah. And that's really, that's a great way to put it, Kevin. I think it's a goal. We will be confined by physical space. We'll be confined by the amount of money we can, put towards this. All of those constraints may limit that collection size. That remains to be seen. And I think that's something that, as you move forward and making this, decisions, those are things you'll need to think about. But I kind of think of what I've put in front of you here, like Like if you're looking for a new house, right? You know, you have 4 kids, and you need 4 bedrooms, you know, you want a realtor to show you a house with 4 bedrooms because that's what you need.
Everybody wants a bath.
Everybody
get it.
wants their own
Might not
bathroom.
get it.
Right? You might not get your own bathroom, or you might have to bunk up, you know, whatever the case may be. So.
But you have to
really-
have a goal though, Natalie, and thank
Right.
you for that.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Okay.
That's helpful. Thanks, Natalie.
You're very welcome. So the next item on the list was the children's program space. And as we've said before, this one really came out, and this came out across many demographics. I think what we saw here from the results was it's not just the young parents that want room for their children to come and have story time or you know, have a you know, interaction with other children in a library space, but grandparents too, I think is what, you know, is what you could infer from some of the results that we've seen here. So as it relates to children's program space, right now there's 525 square feet. I don't know, do I need to make that bigger? Can y'all see that?
A little bigger would be helpful.
Bigger would be good.
Yeah, there you go. Is that helpful?
No, we're still on the young adults and magazines charts.
You
Yeah.
are?
Yep.
I think you just shared something.
Oh, there we
You need
go.
to in-share it, yeah.
Can you see it now?
Yeah,
Children's space right here?
yeah.
Okay, thank you. So there are, like I said, there's 525 square feet in the library today, and that's the room right to the left. And included in that room is all of the children's book collection as well. And so I think what you have here is a fairly conservative recommendation in terms of the amount of program space. It doesn't even, it's less than double of what it is today. But this really ranked number 3 in overall features that our residents wanted to see expanded. And what we saw here from a benchmark perspective is that because of that space limitation, we're only offering about 5.5 roughly children's programs per month. That compares to Southern Pines, who's offering 14.8 children's programs on a monthly basis. And so that was really the benchmark analysis that we were able to draw from as it relates to children's space. So imagine something, you know, the current room plus a little bit more. And that too, like I said, is it may be light, you know, when you get into it, it may be that it needs to be a little more
But
than
that's
that.
not only a function of space, the programs, that's a function of hours.
Hours and
So
operate
I
hours and
disagree
traffic.
with the direct analogy that this is a space issue, you know?
Well,
But I think you have a goal again, a good goal.
It's a goal,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I would say that Audrey, and we can speak with her directly about the challenges that she has running children's programs. I think her number 1 challenge would say, I don't have room to put all the kids that want to come. So,
right. Is that waiting
Yep.
room?
yeah, so, okay. So that's children's space. Then the digital learning lab. And there was some good benchmark analysis here for the number of computers that you typically find in a municipal library. And right now, the library has 1 public computer available, which is far, far less than what other libraries typically offer. That is where folks who either, you know, children who don't have computers at home to do homework often go to a library to use the free computer access, things of that nature. But the recommendation here, Kevin, to use your word, the goal is maybe somewhere between 2 and 4 public computers. And similar to, you know, print collection, this is far less than what you typically would see in a municipal library. So when we look at the benchmark analysis, we have 0.3 computers for every 5,000 residents. And in North Carolina, municipal libraries typically provide 9.7 computers for every 5,000 residents.
Natalie,
And-
in this case, this is the large computer station type situation.
It could be,
I mean,
a
I mean,
table with
I mean,
laptops.
I haven't seen it, but do libraries issue notebooks that connect to the network and
Absolutely.
use the existing space?
They
In
could.
other words, what I'm trying to say is there are creative ways to get to these goals.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And some libraries even do checkouts of Chromebooks or
Which,
laptops or
you know,
things of
I
that.
think with a resident, I wouldn't hesitate.
Yeah, yeah. So absolutely, that is certainly something that you may want to consider down the road. So when we look at digital learning lab and public computers and what our residents said, 40% of them in total said that expanded computers in the library was extremely or very needed. And again, this under 34 segment of our population expressed a much higher need for those computers than our older residents did, okay?
So
So-
what is the actual percentage of the population that would fall in that under 34 compared to 65 and older, which 65 and older, I thought was still 60% of the population.
I do not have that information right here in front of me, Jane, but I can get the census breakdown if that's what you're looking for.
But I know we've seen it before. I just was looking for it. I couldn't find it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's not in there.
Just an anecdote from the public health, you know, when they lowered the vaccine age to 65, they said 1 out of 4 people in our population are over 65. Now that's Moore County overall.
Yeah.
That's Moore County, I think, Judy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Moore County.
Based on
overall.
100,000 or so in Moore County, yeah.
Are you guys still
I guess
seeing?
what Jane's saying, though, the need looks like it's under 34, and the percentage of the population, then there's a smaller percentage that needs it. And, you know, what that quantity of people, it's probably not very large. You know,
I think we should just understand our numbers
Right,
Mhm.
right.
so
And I'll try to-
rather than, right, properly.
Okay, so I will send that to you separately,
Thanks.
if that's okay. Okay. Is everyone still able to see the memo?
Yep.
Okay,
No,
Digital Learning Lab chart is what
in
we're on.
public libraries?
Hey, Jay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so that is, that's really number of public computers per 5,000 residents. So there's that benchmark data that I just reviewed with you, okay? Then the next thing in this tier 1, this is really the last thing kind of in tier 1, is some type of flexible space for small groups, lectures, and discussion groups. I did not have any benchmark analysis for this. So really what you have here is, 1,000 square feet, up to, you can see it's up to 1,000 square feet that could be flexible to meet the needs of adults and teen groups that want to get together for a lecture or discussion group. And so what you see here is there was a fairly sizable demand for this in the 45 to 54 and the under 34 segments. And overall, 40% said it's extremely or very needed. And then you're getting closer to 80% when you add moderately or slightly needed as well. So I think the ETSU survey results would indicate that there is some public support for space, expanded space for groups to meet.
Yeah,
Small
and what's exciting is we have space beyond the library to help in this as well.
Correct. Okay. And then you get into the technical, administrative, storage, circulation, office, break room space. And that's all just a mathematical function. And that is roughly 20 to 30% needed for just general circulation. And when I say general circulation, that means people walking around. So people have to be able to stand in front of the stacks. They have to be able to walk down a hallway to a restroom or walk to their office, those kinds of things. But then there's, pretty limited amount of space here, I think, for just general entry circulation, administrative office space. And then, of course, you've got to house all your data, mechanical and servers and things of that nature. So this is a pretty large component of the entire recommendation. And in fact, all of that administrative space accounts for about 25% of the total overall, recommended facility size. Now, there may be options, with creative design to get that, as concise and as small as possible. But at the end of the day, there will need to be room for these functions in the building.
Natalie?
Yes,
it's
sir.
John. That number, 25% for general circulation space, however you describe it, always seems a bit large to me, and you've spoken to that point, but are there any nuances to that that you might have uncovered talking to a consultant on that?
So Fred, Fred says, originally said 30, and I was like, well, can you do it for less than that? Like, he said, it's typically between 20 to 30. And again, it all depends on the layout of the building. Minimizing hallways, say, for example, could help get that number down, just in terms of how the space is configured. So,
Also, wouldn't the way it's managed, like, what if
yes.
it was managed by, I don't know who in our department would manage it, the Parks and Rec? I don't know. Maybe it'd be its own department, I don't know.
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is when it be a municipal space, it's very possible, libraries usually have to be self-contained, maybe in our case, there might be someone off-site.
And that's true. I mean, you could have some library functions in a different location. You could have library functions operating on a first or a second floor. All of those would impact the ultimate, square footage needed. Typically, when you separate, I will tell you that the consultants did tell me this. When you separate, let's say, for example, if we were going to say all library programs are going to be in a separate location, then you might, you have to figure out, well, when they need access to books or materials, you got to transport them, and you have to have a public
Yeah, it's
restroom.
not
for
ideal.
each of those.
Not
Yeah.
ideal.
Yeah. So there are other things to think about, but there's certainly options, Kevin. Absolutely.
But no, but I'm with John, I just find that incredibly high, but
I think we've
it
touched
sounds
on the
really-
idea that it seems to me that the design of the building, or shall we say whether the building's one floor or two, or whether you emphasize open space as opposed to closed space, really affects that number in the end. And
Right.
I mean, if you just
so
look at
we'll
the
just see what
community
happens, but it's an
center,
interesting part of the equation. Judy, is that you?
Yeah, if you look at the community center, that'd be interesting to get that analog there.
Yeah.
Because the offices are
Yeah,
a larger percentage, hallways are a big percentage. The
Restrooms,
Restrooms, I think it seems very reasonable.
Mhm.
Because you think
And
about.
it's just,
Okay.
what Kevin said is, isn't this just a starting point? I mean,
It is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to whittle it down right now, but we've got to have some sort of general idea of where this is going.
Right.
But I
Natalie,
think
what else
Judy
you
makes
got?
a good point. What I can do is I can look at the community center building, right? Look at those plans and calculate it and just see how close it is to this 20 or 30% number. That might give you more or, less confidence in it. So,
as much as I like that idea, I think it would be artificially low because of the large gymnasium.
it may be.
kind
Or
of,
we could do Village Hall. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
but the community, well, whatever.
Yeah.
I might do both.
Yeah, librarians need a place to work.
Right.
And there's going to be some receiving of books and, things like that, organizing. So, it's not unreasonable.
Yeah. Okay. So that is really like the grand total of tier one. So I think the highest needs that were expressed were I'm going to scroll down to the bottom here. Were collection, children's program space, a couple of computers, and a room for book clubs and discussion groups. And when you add all of that together, it comes up to 10,128 to 14,612 square feet. For those 4 key things, 5 if you include all the administrative stuff. Then in addition to that, there were a couple of other areas or things that came out of the survey that had some express need, some, you know, again, higher for some segments than others. And that is, if you felt like, you know, 500 or 750 or 1,000 square feet was not enough room, you may want to add some additional room, flexible space for programs. This, you know, tier 1 does not consider a conference room that would have technology where you could do a Zoom meeting or a Skype meeting in the library in a separate space with a small group. And it obviously does not include an individual quiet study kind of workspace. So if a kid, you know, if a student wanted to come study after school at the library, as it's currently designed in tier 1, there is not a dedicated quiet space for a student to go do their homework in a quiet space. So that's why we've kind of added the tier 2 here as well.
Aren't libraries by definition quiet spaces?
Not anymore.
No,
I'm not sure, I'm saying this facetiously,
I mean,
but
if
I'm not sure the
children's
current
section is
generation of,
separated off.
I'm not sure the current generation of student needs to have quiet space. They seem to operate very well studying and with multitasking going on and a lot of noise. But anyway, that's just,
my daughter goes to the roast office to
There you go.
study.
I use libraries and they're quiet. I go to Southern Pines. I was in Wilmington. I mean, it's a holiday weekend. I was in Wilmington. At the library, there was one other person in this massive library. It was a quiet space.
yeah.
Yeah,
So libraries are quiet spaces.
yeah. Today, the Given Memorial Library is not quiet on Saturday morning when the moms are in there with 20 children.
Right.
Yeah,
It's not quiet at all.
right.
So, you know, so this is just to account for potentially some additional quiet space tucked in a corner, wherever the case might be. And of course, that would affect the incremental service space and so on and so forth. So total for tier 1 and 2 combined is 11,500 to roughly 17,000. The recommendation of 10 to 12,000 really comes from the fact that it's the low to midpoint, and it's also right around the low of tier 2. Okay, so it's the low to midpoint of tier 1, and it's the low of tier 2. So there could be an opportunity to get some of this space in there in the 10 to 12,000 square foot range. You know, if this circulation could be low, if, you know, just based on how things are designed. So that's really all I wanted to cover in this work session. It's just to
Okay.
help you kind of understand, you know, where those numbers came from. You know, and the memo provides you with all of the background and supporting information. You know, you've got the survey results in there as well. And then, of course, you know, I gave you the picture of the current building, so you could just kind of visualize where things are right now. So
Yeah.
this is the children's room. This is where the adult programs occur. Collection is along the walls in both of these front rooms. This is really the only stack room. This Eric Nelson room has a conference table. So, you know, this could serve as a conference meeting room, if you will.
And it does.
And it does
Book club
today.
meet there, yeah.
Mhm.
It does. I started my
It
business
does.
there.
Yeah, yeah. And then you've got, you know, you got offices, restrooms, break rooms over here. That, you know, that kind of stuff is shared between the library and the archives. And then you've got this room kind of in between the two where there's archives collection, and it kind of serves as a little of both, so. So that's really all I had. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them right now.
Natalie, that's very
Right.
helpful. And I think we've identified pretty well what are some of the constraints or the things that are not included in this, as well as all the issues that you evaluated putting it together. So appreciate that a lot. Was there another question though to Natalie? Did I hear somebody?
No, I
Yeah,
just,
Okay,
I have one.
Jane.
What determines the number of librarians and staff that you're gonna need? Is it square footage?
It is, yes. Well, yes and no.
Selection square footage, I mean,
So number one, I can't estimate the number of librarians needed, but I will say that the recommendation is that there is a librarian and then there are staff support. There are people, it's probably partially driven, Jane, by the size of the collection. I mean, which of course drives the size of the building. It would be driven also by the number of programs that the library wants to hold.
How about hours?
It would be a function of the operating hours of the facility. So there really are a lot of factors, I think, Jane, that go into that. It's not just the square footage.
And on the floor plan of the existing library building that you were just showing us,
Uh-huh.
and part of it's devoted to the archives and part of it's devoted to the library, and then there's the part in the middle.
Uh-huh.
That shared library and archive space, how big is that? How many square feet is that?
The shared library and archive space is, give me 2 seconds. That space is a total of it's, hold on 2 seconds. I'm gonna add it up for you real quick.
Jane, when you say shared space though, are you meaning the offices, the restrooms, the passages way that we were talking about a little while ago? Is
Right,
that,
the part in yellow.
okay,
the Tim Whistles room and the offices and restrooms.
Yeah, it's about 750 square feet.
yeah.
Okay, so when we say that the existing library building has 3,825 square feet for the library on the first floor,
Correct.
and 2,475 for the archives on the first floor,
Uh-huh.
does that include the 750 or is the
Yes,
750?
it does. Yes, it does.
And how is that 750 allocated between them?
50-50.
Okay,
Good.
Yeah. So the shared archive space, I just split 50 to archives, 50 to library space. And the 3825, so then would include the library plus half of what's in yellow.
right,
Archives would include the archives plus the basement plus half of what's in yellow.
right.
Uh-huh.
Because when you look at the numbers on the chart you put together
Mhm.
for administrative space that a
Uh-huh.
library would need, it's a lot bigger number than 750.
It is.
Even if you gave it all, even if you gave the whole 750 to the library space
Mhm.
in this building,
But that doesn't mean this is right.
it's quite a bit more.
But this
Your
is not,
staff.
Yeah, it's a bigger staff, yes. It's a larger collection. It's more room for circulation, putting books back on shelves, those kinds of things.
It's an interesting comparison.
Thank you.
Okay,
And
we
I
have
just
some
wanted-
other business.
I apologize, I didn't see this because I got the closed session material last night. And I only looked at the static memo. I apologize, Natalie.
That's
Didn't
okay.
See it
We-
in there because I was very focused on being ready for the closed session.
Okay.
We have, all right, well, let's,
24 hours.
I think we've received the report as expected from Natalie, and thank you very much for that.
You're
We
welcome.
we do have some other business the council will be going into closed session for. So at this time, I'll call for a motion to move into closed session. And I know some of you out there have that.
I'd move to, in the work session, we'll move into a closed session.
I
Motion
second.
move into closed session by Judy Davis. Is there a second?
I second, John.
Second by Lydia Bosch. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We'll move into closed session and begin that in about 2:15, 5, 6 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.